Peace begins the moment you stop controlling everything. But most people will never know peace because they've mistaken control for power. They've confused the tight grip with safety. They've been conditioned to believe that if they're not orchestrating every detail, every reaction, every outcome, then life will betray them. But the betrayal already happened. It happened the moment you started trading trust for tension. The moment you stopped listening and started managing. The moment you took your spirit, raw, infinite, intuitive, and stuffed it inside a calendar, a checklist, a script that someone else wrote for you. You were not born to control. You were born to collaborate with the unknown, with the unseen, with the unfolding. But the world taught you the opposite. It trained your nervous system to equate stillness with failure. It taught you to plan every move before you breathe, to measure worth by how much of the chaos you can hold without collapsing, to take every outcome personally as if life owed you an explanation. But life doesn't negotiate with clenched fists. It doesn't respond to control. It responds to coherence. Because control is not the language of peace. It is the language of fear. Carl Jung warned us of this long before the world descended into its modern frenzy. He said that what you suppress will rule you from the shadows. And that is what control is. It's the shadow self masquerading as discipline. It's fear wearing the mask of structure. It's the trauma response dressed up in productivity. And it's killing us. You think you're protecting yourself by controlling, but what you're really doing is contracting your muscles, your breath, your ability to receive. You don't leave space for mystery because you don't trust the unknown. You don't leave room for intuition because it doesn't fit inside the boxes you've built. And that's why you're exhausted. Not because life is too much, but because you're trying to manage life instead of meeting it. This is psyphoria, the psychological illusion that the more control you exert, the more peace you gain. But it's a lie, because control doesn't bring peace, it kills it. Control is a prison with golden bars. You feel safe inside, but the cost is your aliveness, your creativity, your real power. Because power is not found in the clenched hand, it's found in the open palm. And peace? Peace begins the moment you stop needing to know how it all unfolds. It begins the moment you release your obsession with being right, with being perfect, with being safe in a world that was never meant to be predictable. You were meant to flow, not to freeze. You were meant to surrender, not submit. You were meant to move with life, not manage it like a scared accountant tracking every possible loss. Because you don't lose anything real when you let go. You only lose the illusion that you're in control, the illusion that if you worry enough, you'll prevent pain, the illusion that certainty is peace, when in truth, certainty is just control and drag. And drag is exhausting. It's heavy. It's unnatural. So ask yourself, how long will you carry the weight? How long will you micromanage every conversation, every outcome, every version of yourself that walks into a room? How long will you choke your own spirit, calling it preparation? At some point, you have to trust. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's truth. And truth is the only place peace can live. Not in perfection, not in control, not in manipulation or strategy or forcing people to act how you need them to act. Peace lives in surrender. And surrender isn't weakness. It's the ultimate act of intelligence. Because only the fool believes they can control life. The wise become fluid. They become still. They don't control the waves. They become the tide. And when you become the tide, nothing shakes you. Not because nothing changes, but because you've stopped resisting the change. You ride it, you move with it. And that's when life opens. Not before. Never before. Only when you release the illusion that you were ever in control to begin with. Only when your breath deepens and your grip softens. Only when you stop fighting the moment you're in and start flowing with it. That's where peace begins. And from that peace, everything real starts to grow. Because peace is not passive, it is power in its purest form. It is not the absence of chaos, but the refusal to be controlled by it. It is not found by eliminating risk, but by embracing it with rootedness. It is the stillness that says, I trust the moment, even if it doesn't look like the plan. That stillness, that is your birthright. But you gave it away. You gave it to the world that demanded certainty. You gave it to the people who praised your productivity but never cared for your presence. You gave it to your anxiety, your past, your projections of a future that doesn't even exist yet. And now, all that control has become a shield and a prison. You control to feel safe, and you wonder why you never feel free. But freedom doesn't come through management. It comes through mastery. And mastery begins when you learn to let go without collapsing, when you learn to breathe in the uncertainty, when you learn to watch your mind reach for control and not grab it. That's what real peace island, not a calm environment, a calm core. Because the storm will always come. The deadline will always loom. The people will always be unpredictable. But when your peace is no longer held hostage by outcomes, you become untouchable. You walk into rooms with nothing to prove. You speak without needing to be understood. You move without seeking permission. Because you trust that life moves with you, not because you planned it, but because you aligned with it. And alignment doesn't require force. It requires faith. Not blind faith, but embodied faith, the kind that doesn't need a guarantee to show up fully. The kind that says, I don't know what's coming, but I trust who I'll be when it arrives. And that kind of faith, that kind of peace, it only lives where control dies, where the ego steps back, where the nervous system stops playing war games and starts listening to the deeper signal underneath the noise, listening to the voice that doesn't speak in fear or timelines or checklists, but in resonance. You know that voice. It's always been there. You just couldn't hear it beneath the noise of your need to control. But now it speaks clearly, because your grip is loosening, your breath is deeper, your body is remembering how to rest. Not collapse or rest, because rest is what happens when you no longer live in resistance. Rest is what happens when you stop trying to control life like a machine and start experiencing it as a miracle that doesn't need you to manage it. Just to meet it fully, faithfully, finally, fully, faithfully, finally. That's where peace begins, not when you fix everything, but when you stop needing to. Not when the world bends to your control, but when you no longer bend your spirit to control the world. That's the beginning of inner authority. The moment when you no longer outsource your stability to someone else's behavior, or a perfectly executed plan, or the illusion of constant progress. Because peace doesn't ask for performance. It asks for presence. It says, I will not betray my breath for approval. I will not manipulate reality just to avoid discomfort. I will not abandon my now trying to control a tomorrow that doesn't exist yet. And in that presence you find what no achievement ever gave you. Sanctuary, not the kind built with walls. The kind built within. You walk slower. You speak with pause. You listen with depth. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from wisdom, because you realize nothing real was ever created from panic, and everything powerful was born from peace. The Sistine Chapel wasn't painted in a rush. The deepest books were written from silence. The most transcendent moments in history didn't come from control, they came from alignment, from people who could stand inside the unknown without flinching, who could watch the structures around them collapse and not collapse with them, because their peace was not circumstantial. It was spiritual. It was cellular. It was built beneath the noise, underneath the fear, inside the surrender. That is what's possible for you, not when life calms down. Not when everything makes sense. But the moment you stop trying to make it make sense and trust that you make sense, even in the chaos, you are not here to control. You are here to co-create. You are not here to plan every step. You are here to walk them anyway. You are not here to perfect your path. You are here to become the path. And that path begins in one moment. This moment, right now. The moment you exhale. The moment you unclench. The moment you stop managing everything and simply meet yourself. This is where peace lives. And this right here is where you finally return to it. Return to it not as a visitor, not as a stranger, but as the rightful keeper of your own stillness. Because you were never meant to be at war with the moment. You were never meant to live inside your own head, rehearsing disaster, overcorrecting your every move, predicting the next betrayal like it's a form of protection. You were meant to be fully, freely, fearlessly. But somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned that presence was dangerous, that letting go was reckless, that stillness was laziness. So you became a controller, a fixer, a manager of invisible outcomes and imagined crises. You called it strength. You called it responsibility. You called it discipline. But deep down you knew it was fear in disguise. And fear doesn't care how much success you build. It doesn't care how much people praise your productivity. Fear just wants you small. Fear wants you clenched. Fear wants you predictable. Because unpredictable people, the ones who surrender to the unknown, who ride the edge of their intuition, who trust something beyond the visible, terrify the system, they are free. And a free person cannot be controlled. So of course you were taught to control. It was never about peace. It was about containment. Keep the chaos inside. Keep the truth quiet. Keep the breath shallow. Keep the joy moderate. Keep the anger swallowed. But here you are, now waking up to the cost of that containment. The fatigue, the burnout, the spiritual disconnection that no routine can fix. Because your soul doesn't want routine. It wants relationship with yourself, with this moment, with the sacred rhythm you buried under urgency. And the only way back is surrender. Not the kind that collapses in defeat, the kind that rises in trust. The kind that says, I no longer need to hold everything together because I was never supposed to. The kind that finally lets go, not to lose control, but to reclaim your life. That's peace. Not a mood, not a moment, a return. And when you return to peace, you don't just feel better. You see clearer, you act cleaner, you speak simpler, you decide faster. Because now your mind is no longer a battlefield. It's a sanctuary, a space where nothing needs to be controlled, because everything is held by something older than logic, deeper than language, and stronger than fear, held by you. The real you, the you that was never meant to live clenched in survival, the you that no longer forces flow but becomes it. And from that place, you don't just move through the world, you change it. You change it not with noise, not with domination, not with control, but with resonance. The kind of resonance that can only come from a soul in alignment. The kind that doesn't demand obedience, because it commands respect without asking. The kind that shifts the atmosphere of a room, not through force, but through frequency. Because peace is a frequency. And once you hold it, once you've anchored it deep into your being, it ripples. It moves ahead of you. It speaks before you speak. It decides who enters your life without a word. It protects you better than any boundary built in panic. Because now, your peace isn't negotiable. It isn't conditional. It isn't reactive. It is you. It's in your walk. It's in your words. It's in the way you no longer need to be liked or understood or even seen. Because you've seen yourself. And what you saw was enough. Not the version they praised. Not the one you performed. But the version that exists only when you stop trying to control the moment and finally meet it. And in meeting the moment, you meet your life again. Not the life you forced, the one you crafted in reaction to your wounds, but the life that was meant for you. The one that unfolds with grace, with rhythm, with alignment. And now you're ready? Not because you planned every step, but because you stopped resisting the next one. And when you stop resisting, everything that's been trying to reach you, your clarity, your purpose, your calling, your people, they find you easily, naturally, effortlessly, because peace is magnetic. It draws the real and repels the false. It makes no deals with fear. It plays no games for control. It's simply island. And once you become it, you realize you never needed to control anything to be safe. You only needed to return to your breath, to your body, to your truth, to your trust. And that return, it changes everything. Without force, without fear, without needing to be right. Just still, just steady, just free. Because peace begins the moment you stop controlling everything and never ends once you decide you never will again. And when you decide, truly decide, that control no longer has a seat at the table of your life, you reclaim a kind of authority that cannot be bought, broken, or borrowed. You reclaim sovereignty, not the kind written in titles or earned through status, the kind that comes from within, the kind that breathes instead of bracing, that moves without needing to be moved, that stands without needing to be loud. This sovereignty, it is sacred because it's built on trust, not trust in outcomes, not trust in systems, not even trust in others, but trust in your own alignment, in your own ability to navigate life without manipulating it, in your own capacity to hold pain without performing, to hold joy without fearing its end, to hold yourself without condition. That's where freedom begins. Not when the world becomes predictable, but when your inner world no longer requires it to be. When your peace isn't a reaction to how well things go, but a decision to meet life exactly as it is, without armor, without agenda, because you're not here to bend the world to your comfort. You're here to grow roots strong enough to remain grounded, no matter how the winds change. And those roots, they grow deepest in surrender, in the choice to say, I don't need to control this moment to belong in it. I don't need to manage life to feel alive. I don't need to manipulate outcomes to stay whole. Peace becomes your baseline, not because everything goes your way, but because you no longer need it to. And the moment you no longer need life to bend, it starts to move with you, not in obedience, but in respect. Because you've shown the universe something few ever do. You are ready, ready to lead from stillness, to act from clarity, to live without gripping, to love without losing yourself, to rise without rushing, to hold power without force. And once you reach that place where control dissolves and peace takes its rightful place, you don't just live, you radiate. And the world doesn't just watch, it remembers. It remembers what presence feels like, what depth looks like, what it means to walk without flinching, to speak without trying to convince, to exist without needing to dominate. Because when you embody peace, you give others permission to return to it as well. Not through instruction, through example, through your silence that says more than noise ever could, through your choices that don't seek validation, through your calm refusal to participate in chaos just to prove your relevance. You become the lighthouse in a world addicted to storms. And people will notice. They'll be drawn to you without knowing why. They'll feel safe around you, even if they don't understand it, because they won't feel controlled. They'll feel met. You meet people the same way you meet life, not to manage them, but to witness them. And that witnessing, that is the most healing gift a human being can offer. Not fixing, not forcing, just seeing, just holding, just being. And only someone who has surrendered their grip on control can offer that. Only someone who has let their own fear dissolve into presence can say to another, without speaking, you don't need to perform here. You don't need to be perfect. You are allowed to be. And that energy, that peace, it spreads, it expands, it changes families, it reshapes relationships, it breaks generational patterns that were born in fear and passed down through panic. Because one soul rooted in peace is more powerful than 1,000 shouting in strategy. One soul who has stopped controlling becomes a portal to what's real. And the world needs real, more than ever. Not curated, not filtered, real. And that begins not with another plan, another book, another method, but with you. Sitting still, breathing deep, unclenching, and choosing one breath at a time to trust. Not what happens next, but what is already within. That's peace, that's power, that's presence. And it begins right now because there is no other moment. No future version of you who is more prepared. No perfect environment waiting to make you feel ready. No golden hour where all the wounds are healed and all the plans unfold like clockwork. There is only now. And in now, you decide to stop controlling, to stop anticipating pain like it's your job, to stop negotiating with fear like it holds the blueprint to your life, to stop mistaking anxiety for strategy. Because control isn't the path to safety, it's the barrier between you and the life that's trying to reach you. And that life, it isn't found through pressure. It's accessed through permission, the permission to be human, to feel, to fall, to not know, and still walk forward anyway. To no longer build your peace on the behavior of others, but on the bedrock of your own awareness. Because you are not your panic. You are not your patterns. You are not your past rehearsing itself under the mask of productivity. You are presence. You are the observer behind the noise. You are the silence that doesn't need to speak because it knows. You've just been buried under expectations, under urgency, under a life designed by your ego to protect you from the very thing your soul came here to do, surrender. Not to give up, but to give in, to the rhythm, to the wisdom, to the inner signal that's been speaking beneath your panic for years. That voice that said, let go. The one you ignored because control felt safer than freedom. But you're ready now. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You've tried control. You've mastered it. You've white-knuckled your way through seasons that should have broken you. And now it's time to release, to move differently, to choose trust not because it's easy, but because you've seen where control leads. And you know this now. The real work is not to control more. It's to trust deeper. And from that trust, everything aligns. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped trying to. Because the moment you stop trying to force alignment, you allow it. And what you allow with grace begins to unfold with power. You begin to notice things again, subtle things, the quiet wisdom in your gut that used to be drowned out by urgency, the way your breath softens when you tell the truth, even if your voice shakes, the way certain rooms drain you not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown performing there. You start living from the inside out, not chasing peace like it's something external, but walking in peace because it's now your baseline, not adjusting yourself to fit into tight spaces, but expanding into rooms that can hold your truth. And this expansion, it doesn't come through effort. It comes through release. The release of the fantasy that if you control well enough, you won't feel pain. The release of the lie that you must always have a plan. The release of the idea that life rewards tension over trust. Because what you hold onto out of fear becomes your master. But what you release from trust becomes your mirror. A mirror that reflects back your groundedness, your wisdom, your sovereignty. Not the kind of sovereignty that needs to be loud, but the kind that makes noise irrelevant. Because when you're no longer controlling everything, you don't need to speak from fear. You speak from frequency. Your energy does the work. Your silence speaks volumes. Your being leads, and people feel it. They may not understand why, but they'll feel the gravity in your stillness, the edge in your clarity, the softness in your strength, because you are no longer gripped by life. You're in flow with it. And in that flow, there is no convincing, there is no performing, there is no resistance, only reverence for every breath, for every step, for every sacred moment you used to overlook while trying to control what came next. But not anymore. Now you are here. Now you are present. Now you are free. Free not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you finally released the need to bend reality to your will. Because you stopped equating control with security and found strength in surrender. Because you remembered. Peace isn't something you achieve. It's something you return to. It was always yours, buried beneath the strategies, the tension, the expectations you wore like armor. And now? Now the armor is gone. Now the fight is over. Now the silence is sacred, not empty. Now your breath is full, not shallow. Now your power is quiet, not desperate. Because peace doesn't roar, it resonates. It radiates from your spine, from your posture, from your presence. And in that presence, the world begins to respond differently. Not because you controlled it, but because you no longer needed to. This is what it means to be truly alive. Not in panic, not in performance, but in peace. And that peace, it begins the moment you stop controlling everything and never ends. Because from this moment forward, you never will again. The more you force life, the less it works. The more you chase, the more it slips. The more you grasp, the more it resists. Because life is not a machine you control, it is a mirror. And when you come to the mirror, frantic, impatient, demanding answers, life shows you not clarity, but chaos. Not certainty, but confusion. Not alignment, but anxiety. And yet, most people don't know any other way. They were taught to force, taught to hustle, taught to measure progress by exhaustion. They were taught that to win, they had to outwork the world, outthink the problem, outrun the fear. But fear doesn't respond to force. It responds to presence. Because you can't beat life into giving you peace. You can't claw your way into stillness. You can't scream your way into purpose. The more you force it, the more it slips between your fingers like sand laced with gasoline, burning you as you try to grip it tighter. You've mistaken pressure for power. You've confused movement with momentum. You've idolized struggle and called it strength. But none of it is working, is it? Because the truth is, force only creates friction. Friction between who you are and who you think you should be. Friction between the vision and the timeline. Friction between the path you're on and the one your soul is begging you to walk. And the more friction you create, the more you burn. You feel it in your body, in your mind, in your relationships. You feel it in the decisions that don't land, in the plans that fall flat, in the way life seems to stall the moment you try to push. Because here's the secret, they don't teach in school. Life doesn't yield to force, it yields to alignment. And alignment isn't something you achieve through intensity. It's something you remember in stillness. But we're not trained for stillness. We're addicted to motion, addicted to the myth that if we're not doing more, we're becoming less. So we overthink, we overplan, we overextend. And then we wonder why everything feels so heavy. Why the door won't open. Why the people pull away. Why the clarity never lands. It's because we're trying to plant seeds with clenched fists, trying to start fires with wet matches, trying to build futures from a frequency of fear. You don't need to force what flows. But first you have to stop forcing. Carl Jung once said, what you resist not only persists but grows in size. But what you force, it decays. Because force is rooted in fear. And fear is scarcity disguised as strategy. Fear says, I must act now, or I'll miss everything. Fear says, I must prove, perform, pretend, because who I am isn't enough. But alignment says, what's mine will not miss me. Alignment says, my presence is my power. Alignment doesn't beg. It attracts, it doesn't chase, it calibrates, it doesn't scream, it speaks and is heard. This is psyphoria. The moment the soul begins to fracture from the strain of living a life not based on essence, but on expectation, the mind starts to blur, the vision starts to cloud, and you can't tell anymore if you're moving forward or just running in circles faster. And in that fog, your ego panics. It starts demanding answers now, fast. Any answer is better than no answer, it says. But it's wrong, because urgency is the language of the unaligned. When you're aligned, you don't rush. You respond. When you're aligned, you don't force the door. You wait for it to open because you know it's yours. So what do you do instead? You stop gripping. You start listening. You breathe. You pay attention to what's real, not what's urgent. You watch where life opens, not where it resists. You notice what energizes you, not just what impresses others. You release the need to always be in motion, and you start making moves that are true. Because there is a massive difference between effort and alignment, between working hard and working right. Force says, do more. Flow says, be more of who you actually are. And when you shift from force to flow, from panic to presence, life shifts with you. It becomes cooperative. It becomes co-creative. It becomes clear. Because now, you're not trying to bend the universe to your will. You're walking in rhythm with the part of you that already knows. The part that doesn't need to force anything, because it is everything. And when you realize that, when it clicks, not just in your mind, but in your marrow, you feel it. The tension leaves your shoulders. The noise in your chest quiets. Your thoughts stop sprinting. You realize you've been screaming at a locked door when the right one has been open the whole time, just in a different hallway. You see, when you're forcing, you're not leading your life. You're negotiating with it. You're begging for validation. You're contorting yourself into shapes just to be accepted by the very systems designed to break your spirit. And the cost is you. Every forced move takes you one step further from your center. Every desperate yes spoken out of fear chips away at your integrity. Every time you chase what doesn't resonate, you lose frequency. And frequency is everything. It's what attracts. It's what repels. It's what builds or burns. This isn't about manifestation. This is about physics. This is about the electromagnetic signature of your being. You do not get what you want, you get what you are. And if what you are is frantic, forcing, and fractured, then what you attract will reflect that. But when you align, when you come back to your core and stop leaking energy into dead timelines and fake urgency, you become inevitable. Because now, you're not just another person pushing for results. You are a field of gravity. You are someone who trusts that what flows is real and what resists is redirecting you. You stop seeing rejection as failure and start seeing it as guidance. You stop seeing pauses as punishment and start seeing them as preparation. You stop needing everything to happen on your timeline because you trust the rhythm of the deeper one. But to walk in that rhythm, you have to let go of everything that lives in resistance. Let go of the need to prove. Let go of the addiction to outcome. Let go of the belief that struggle is your default setting. Let go of the illusion that says, if I don't push harder, I will be forgotten. You were never meant to push. You were meant to pull, to magnetize what's yours by being what you are, not what you perform. The tree doesn't force the leaf to grow. It simply creates the environment. It roots deeper. It reaches higher. It trusts the season. And because it trusts, it flourishes. But people, they chop at their own roots just to move faster. They abandon their own soil in search of better light. They forget that timing is not their enemy. Impatience island. And impatience is a form of self-abandonment. It's a refusal to believe that your destiny knows what it's doing. But it does. It always has. It's just waiting for you to stop trying to outsmart your own becoming. The more you force life, the less it works, because life doesn't respond to noise. It responds to resonance. So drop the noise. Drop the urgency. Drop the desperation disguised as discipline. And return to the quiet center, to the knowing beneath the panic, to the truth that's been whispering to you this whole time. You don't have to force what's already yours. You don't have to chase what's already aligned. You don't have to bleed just to prove you're worthy. You don't have to grip so tightly to life that you strangle the very thing you were trying to grow. Let that sink in. What you've been doing isn't wrong, it's just loud. And truth doesn't shout. It waits. It waits until the noise of your ego burns itself out, until your ambition collapses into stillness, until your soul becomes tired of begging and finally decides to listen. Because truth isn't earned through force, it's remembered through surrender. That's the paradox most people will never understand. They're so busy screaming at the world, "Let me in," that they never hear the voice inside whisper, "You've always been in." They're so busy climbing ladders, checking boxes, posting highlights, chasing the next dopamine spike, that they forget life was never a race. It's a rhythm. And you don't win rhythms. You join them. You don't conquer timing. You attune to it. You don't bend the laws of becoming. You bow to them. Because becoming doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to permission. The permission to let it take time. The permission to not have all the answers. The permission to stop pretending and start being. And when you do, that's when life starts to flow again. That's when the people you were meant to meet arrive quietly, easily, without force. That's when opportunities open that feel like home, not like auditions. That's when clarity emerges, not because you demanded it, but because you were still enough to receive it. Because clarity doesn't come when you hunt it down. It comes when you clear the fog of force. It comes when you stop trying to control every outcome, every person, every timeline, and instead you trust, not because you're naive, but because you're no longer available for the chaos of control. You trust because you've lived through the war of force, and now you're ready for the peace of precision. You trust because your intuition has never lied to you. You just drowned it out with noise. You trust because alignment is not a destination, it's a decision. And the decision is this: you will no longer create from scarcity. You will no longer speak from insecurity. You will no longer act from panic. You will root down into who you are and allow that to be enough. Not for approval, not for applause, but because that's where the real power lives. You are no longer forcing, you are flowing. And in that flow, there's no friction, no fight, no fear, only forward. Only forward, because when the fight ends, the real movement begins. Not movement driven by pressure, but by precision. Not movement fueled by fear, but by fire the quiet, knowing fire that no longer needs to rage to be felt. That burns steady, that burns true, because when you stop forcing, you don't stop progressing. You start progressing correctly. You stop sprinting down paths that lead nowhere just because someone else walked them first. You stop filling your days with noise and calling it purpose. You stop performing clarity when you're actually drowning in confusion. And you get honest, painfully honest, not with the world, but with yourself. Because force always begins in self-deception. And flow begins in truth. The truth about what you want, the truth about what you're not, the truth about who you've been pretending to be just to feel safe. That kind of honesty, it doesn't come easy. It costs you everything that was fake, but in its place, it gives you everything that's real. And real doesn't need force. Real doesn't need hustle. Real doesn't need explanation. It just island. It exists beyond justification. It speaks without volume. It lends without effort. And when you embody that, when you walk through this world, no longer needing to prove, no longer pushing to perform, no longer panicking to produce, you become dangerous. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're undeniable. You walk with a different rhythm. You speak with a different frequency. You lead without controlling. You create without contorting. You become so fully yourself that life no longer tests you, it trusts you. Because now you're not wrestling with the river. You are the river, flowing exactly where you're meant to go, touching exactly who you're meant to touch, becoming exactly what you were always destined to become, not because you forced it, but because you finally let go of everything that wasn't you. And now you move through life with that rare energy, the kind that doesn't need attention to feel seen, the kind that doesn't need permission to be powerful, the kind that doesn't need to control a thing to shape everything. That is the power of flow. And that power, it only begins when you stop forcing and finally just be. Just be. Not the version of you that hustles to stay relevant. Not the echo of someone else's approval. Not the mask worn so long you forgot it was never your face. Just be you. Stripped, still, unshakable. Because when you finally get there, when you let go of the pressure to constantly become, you realize you've always been. And that being was enough. Always was. Always will be. You were not born to be a machine. You were born to be a presence. A force of clarity in a fog of noise. A calm tide in a sea of panic. A sharp edge of truth in a world dulled by performance. You were not made to grind your way into grace. You were made to receive it, to align with it, to live it. And you do that by ceasing the war inside yourself. The war that says you're behind. The war that says you must do more to matter. The war that says stillness is laziness and surrender is failure. That war was never yours. It was inherited from systems designed to break your rhythm, not build your power. Let it go. Lay it down. Because it's not just peace that waits on the other side. It's vision, a vision you couldn't see when you were spinning, a vision that emerges only when the dust settles and the soul becomes still enough to hear. And when that vision comes, you don't force it into the world. You flow it. You move with conviction, not compulsion. You act with awareness, not addiction. You create with clarity, not chaos. Because now you're no longer addicted to progress. You're devoted to alignment. You no longer seek speed, you seek truth. And that truth becomes your compass. It becomes your fuel. It becomes the frequency that makes everything around you shift, recalibrate, and rise to meet you, not because you demanded it, but because you matched it. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. But most will never feel it, because they're too busy gripping a life that was never theirs, forcing a destiny that doesn't fit, chasing a peace that only begins where the force ends. But not you. You've seen it now. You've felt the difference. And once you've tasted alignment, force tastes like poison. So you'll never go back. You'll never grip again. You'll never betray your rhythm for approval. You'll never rush what's real or delay what's true. You'll walk calm, focused, untouchable, not because you've mastered life, but because you've let it flow. And in that flow, you don't just navigate life, you command it. Not with effort, but with energy. Not with pressure, but with presence. Not with fear, but with frequency. Because once you let go of the illusion that you must force, chase, prove, once you finally realize that everything real flows to you, when you flow from truth, there's nothing left to fight. The noise stops. The spinning slows. The weight lifts. And suddenly, what once felt like an uphill battle becomes an open path. A path not of ease, but of elegance. Because now, every step is sacred. Every breath is intentional. Every move is rooted in something deeper than willpower. It's rooted in knowing that you don't need to force what's real, knowing that if it resists you, it's revealing you, knowing that when you release the need to control, you step into the power to co-create. This is the space where evolution begins. Not the evolution of your image, not the evolution of your bank account, but the evolution of your essence, of who you are beneath the survival instincts, beneath the strategies, beneath the masks you wore to be loved, liked, accepted. That version of you, it's gone now, burned away in the quiet fire of surrender. And what remains is you unapologetically honest, you unburdened by urgency, you unmoved by pressure. You're no longer available for the energy of force. And because of that, you're now magnetic to peace, magnetic to precision, magnetic to the exact people, places, moments that were always meant for you but couldn't find you while you were hiding behind effort. Now they can see you. Now they can reach you. Now they can meet you. Because you've made room, because you've stopped blocking the current with your clenching, because you finally accepted the truth. The more you force life, the less it works. But when you stop forcing, everything works exactly as it should. Without panic, without pressure, without pretending. Just flow. Flow the silent agreement between your soul and the structure of the universe. Flow the invisible thread that pulls your reality into shape without the strain, without the scream. Flow the frequency of trust made tangible. Because when you stop forcing, when you finally surrender the illusion of control, you stop moving from fear and start moving from faith. Not religious faith, but the embodied faith that says, I trust the current, even when I can't see the shore. You stop asking, what do I do next? And start asking, what is ready to move through me now? You stop panicking over plans and start preparing your presence. Because force needs a plan. Flow only needs presence. And presence is a weapon, a archetype one, a divine one, the kind of weapon that doesn't destroy, it discerns. It filters, it calibrates, it protects your energy from noise, your vision from dilution, your soul from forgetting what it came here to do. Because when you're in flow, you don't just live, you lead. Not others, not systems, not movements. You lead yourself out of chaos, out of scarcity, out of the identity that only knew itself through exhaustion and applause. And you return to rhythm, to resonance, to the source within you that has been silent, not because it's weak, but because it was waiting for you to stop yelling over it. It was waiting for you to stop performing clarity and become clear. And once you do, once you shed the tension, release the timeline, abandon the image, and embody the essence, everything you were chasing starts showing up. Not because you chased it, but because you finally created space for it to arrive. This is the mystery they don't teach. This is the magic that can't be strategized. This is the moment where life meets you not at your most desperate, but at your most aligned. And from here forward, your movement will be different. Because it's no longer frantic, it's focused. It's no longer about getting ahead. It's about getting honest. Honest about what flows. Honest about what doesn't. Honest about who you are when nothing is being forced. And when you live from that truth, you don't need to chase anything. You simply become what everything you've ever wanted has been looking for. And when you become that, when you embody what you used to pursue, you no longer fear the stillness. You honor it. Because you understand the stillness isn't empty. It's sacred. It's not the absence of movement, it's the alignment of it. And you don't fear silence, because your soul is finally loud enough to guide you. You don't fear waiting, because you no longer confuse pause with punishment. You don't fear walking alone, because solitude now feels like sovereignty, not isolation. This is what happens when you stop forcing life to bend to your will and start listening for where life is already leaning in your direction. You start to see the timing wasn't broken. Your trust was. The path wasn't wrong. You were just sprinting with a compass that needed recalibration. And now? Now your compass doesn't point outward. It points inward, to the place where pressure turns into presence, to the still center of your being that has never needed to be chased, only chosen. And the more you choose it, the more life chooses you back. The right opportunities, the right relationships, the right revelations, all flowing to the version of you that finally stopped trying to force water through rock and instead followed the river of resonance. You walk into rooms with that rare frequency now, not arrogance, anchoring, not performance, power, not neediness, knowing. Because the truth is, you are the thing you've been forcing to find. And now that you've let go of trying to manufacture flow, you've become it. A living current, unstoppable not because you rush, but because you move when it's time. Unshakable not because you're cold, but because you're clear. Unreachable not by chaos, but by anything that no longer matches the energy of your peace. So you walk, not fast, not loud, but certain, because you no longer need to force what flows. You are the flow, and nothing works against that. Nothing can work against that. Because when you've become the flow, when your being is no longer a battlefield of resistance, but a river of rhythm, life doesn't fight you. It follows you. You become the silent axis around which your world turns. You become the fixed point in a spinning room. Not because you control the chaos, but because you no longer depend on it. And suddenly, the things that used to shake you no longer register. The opinions that once pierced you now fall silent against your stillness. The rejections that haunted you are seen for what they were: redirection. Because that's the wisdom of the flow. It doesn't attach, it doesn't explain, it doesn't convince. It simply moves. It rises with the tide. It shifts with the current. It adjusts without abandoning itself. That's what you remembered. That's what you are now. You don't need to hold on for dear life. You hold lightly. You hold with trust. You hold knowing that what is real stays, and what isn't will leave. Not as loss, but as liberation. And the irony? Now that you've stopped forcing, you get more done with less. Not because you're doing less work, but because your energy is clean. Your yes is rooted. Your no is sovereign. And your time isn't traded for validation anymore. It's invested in alignment. That kind of life moves differently. It doesn't climb, it rises. It doesn't hustle, it harmonizes. It doesn't beg for attention. It radiates. And in that radiation, everything starts to orbit. Not because you manipulate, but because you magnetize. That's what happens when you stop acting from fear and start aligning with flow. The room shifts when you walk in, not because you need it to, but because you no longer dim your energy for anyone. You've dropped the disguise of force, and in its place, you wear clarity, grace, fire, and silence, the kind that speaks louder than noise ever could. So when others ask, how did you do it? You won't say, I pushed harder. You'll say, I stopped pretending I had to. You'll say, I got still enough to hear. You'll say, I let it come instead of chasing it. And most won't understand. They'll still think force equals power. But you'll know the truth. The more you force life, the less it works. But the moment you align with your rhythm, the moment you surrender the war, the moment you return to trust, life flows, and you flow with it. And in that flow, there is no final destination, only deeper presence. No arrival, only awakening. Because when you stop forcing, you don't just change your results. You change your relationship with life itself. You stop seeing it as a mountain to conquer and start living it as a dance, a breath, a sacred unfolding. You stop begging for certainty and start building from stillness. And from that stillness, you become undeniable, not through dominance, but through resonance. The kind of presence that doesn't knock. It just enters because it belongs, just like you do. Now, here, in this moment, free of force, full of frequency, grounded in the truth that has always waited beneath the noise. You were never here to chase what's yours. You were here to become it. And now that you have, life doesn't resist you. It rises to meet you. So walk not with pressure, not with panic, but with peace. And let them wonder how you move so freely. Let them question why things open for you. Let them guess your secret. But you know, it wasn't luck. It wasn't hustle. It was this. You stopped forcing, and you finally flowed.